Alright, let's go into a couple more of the really big awards contenders. One of them, kind of, you would think on the surface it would seem like, yeah, of course this is going to be a massive awards player, but I still kind of feel like it came from out of nowhere, and there was still a lot of question of, like, it being a remake, another adaptation of a movie that's already won 10 Oscars, so, um, but yeah, two very, very big players here. And I think we're going to start with West Side Story. And I was really, even with, everybody saying, like, oh my god, this is so unnecessary, and oh, what can they really do to change it? But not only is it Spielberg, and it's a Spielberg passion project, where he, like, kind of always wanted to do a musical, and it's kind of crazy that he's this long into his career, and is basically the name that everybody associates with director, or even just movies in general. And he's only just now, like, getting to do this passion project of making a big musical, and it just so happens to be one that already has a very legendary adaptation. But the way you can sort of see it in some of his other movies, like there's the whole, I think it's Temple of Doom has that opening sequence, where you can kind of see where it's like he's kind of been just waiting to kind of burst out and do a full-on musical at some point. And finally, after all this time, one exists. And of course, a Steven Spielberg passion project would ultimately be met with this kind of reception, because sometimes, I mean, it seems obvious, but sometimes even some of the biggest passion projects can kind of go south, like how Gilliam finally got to make the Don Quixote thing, and I don't know how many people even realize it exists now, but it does, and it's out there. And when Scorsese finally made Silence, it felt like it almost kind of came and it made its impact on the people it made its impact on, for sure. But it also feels like it just kind of came and went, and people are just like, oh yeah, that one exists as well in his filmography. Um, but then there are other times where passion projects will really stand out, and you can see, like, it gets that widespread attention, and that whole thing of, like, it felt like it was some big event that was always in the making. And this appears to be one of those. I mean, they're saying, like, the box office isn't what they wanted it to be, or something like that, but I don't even know what that means anymore. When you when you look at box office and how things are successful or whatever, because it's obviously the reception this has been getting, which is the important thing, is pretty much off the charts. And the thing about that is that I was excited for this, not just for it being, a Spielberg passion project, which is just those words together make you anticipate the greatest thing ever, basically. But I am super, and this ended up being potentially a problem watching the Spielberg version, but I am very attached to the 1961 one. When I did a whole video on it a few years ago, where I talked about that I first saw it in a music class in 6th grade, and pretty much from then on, it made it, like, it's weird when you're in school and how, like, people can be really especially when, like, the teacher's just showing you a movie or something, you can be very dismissive and say, oh, because this is school, this sucks, or it's boring, or whatever. But I remember, like, most of us being into it, and, like, it carrying over to the other, like, after we got to the part where it was the Rumble, and the Rumble ended, and we had to go back to our normal class, some of the girls were still crying when we got when we got back to the regular class. And it just made this immediate impact on me. I went and got a VHS from the FYE that was in the mall at the time, to watch it all the way through, instead of just in the pieces that we had to watch it through the various days in the class. And I just watched it over and over again. I could, like, and I don't know that I had, obviously, The Wizard of Oz is just a part of me, but apart from that, I don't know that I had taken to a musical the way I took to this one in particular. So I didn't really think about how much that was going to impact this, because because they were talking about how, like, it's more of an adaptation of the show, so there's going to be some songs that are kind of, like, out of order of the story than they are in Robert Wise's movie, but and Jerome Robbins, if you want to go into the choreography as well. But it's, yeah, so that's the thing, is I was noticing that there is definitely a wow factor to what Spielberg was doing that does kind of transcend this movie, where it's like the opening scene. I remember talking about the opening scene where it was like we get those shots, these overhead shots of the city, but then when we come down and we start doing the musical numbers, it feels a little bit more confined, almost like it's on a stage. And while I do love that about the 61 movie, I did find it very interesting that we kind of get to see throughout Spielberg's movie, like, going into the streets and seeing, like, a bunch of extras there, and getting the feel that we're actually in a full city and not necessarily just this sort of confined stage-like setting. And that seems to be one of the first things they kind of went after as far as setting up, like, a scope to this thing. And then when you see the dance sequences in particular, the way, like, the camera sort of flows with them, and it makes everything feel like it's on this really grand spectacle that goes beyond, a stage production, and it's, like, out here in the streets of this actual real city, that make it feel really big. And so that immediately I was able to appreciate, but at the same time, when these numbers are happening, I don't know that and this is, like, I can't put this, against the movie or against Spielberg or anything like that. It's just like it's hard for me to I've noticed, like, a really passionate reaction to this one, just because I have such an attachment to this one, and it's like, while these are moments that he's kind of amplified a little bit from this one, it does still feel like the story is kind of like, yeah, I know this beat, and I know this is the next beat, and this is the next, and this is the next song, and so on. So I can't help but wonder if it's one of those things where I just need to see it again, because there's always going to be, like there's, I guess the example I can use is, I have a friend that makes montages, mainly for, like, directors, and she takes a bunch of clips from other movies and puts them together in these really creative. They're basically works of art in themselves, and really speak to the director's filmographies and their whole work, and kind of encapsulates, like, everything they've said as a filmmaker in the span of, like, 6 minutes. And it's like, when I watch those over and over again, I can see just, like, these really tiny nuanced details and, like, transitions in there. But the first time I watch them, it's always just name the movie, like as it goes by, like, oh, that's, this movie, that's this movie, and so on. And then it's not till I go back and so it's like watching Spielberg's West Side Story for the first time kind of felt like the name the movie part of when I watch those montages. It's just like, yeah, here's this song and this number and these characters and so on, and it's like, yeah, I know this stuff. But that's the thing also, is it's like the changes that he did make. There are some significant ones also. I'm really not familiar at all with the show, so I don't really know what is, like, a Spielberg change and what is a no, this is the way the show was thing. I do know that I looked into a couple of things. Like, it was very jarring that I Feel Pretty was after the Rumble, uh, but to my understanding, that's a show thing, and it is the whole thing where it's like, it does sort of add this gloom and doom that wasn't there in the original movie, where it was like, where she's so unaware of what's already happened. She's so unaware of the darkness, because it's like, if you go in blind to the original movie and I Feel Pretty happens, you as an audience member are also blind to what is to come. If you're unaware of that, it's like literally Romeo and Juliet and that it's gonna get dark. Yeah, but the idea of, like, us knowing what has happened and the darkness that is starting to take over, while Maria's still oblivious to this, does kind of have this other sort of feel to it, that sort of amplifies just how dark we're getting, kind of, like, really showing us the contrast of what the story was and the direction that it's going. And that whole idea of even a love that could be this innocent could lead to something like this, could lead to multiple deaths and ruined lives and all that stuff. Wasted youth, all that stuff. Um, there's Cool coming before the Rumble, where it's like an actual Tony related song, which I wasn't expecting either, but also works just as well. It's actually probably one of the more memorable numbers as far as its execution, and, like, the setting is very cool, and having that between Tony and Riff, which is honestly just, like, that's one of those cases where it's like that one just makes more sense, I think. Much as I love the original movie and where the number is in it, it does make a lot more sense the way it is here, and it being Tony and Riff interaction. And like I said, the execution of that is great also. I guess some of the other changes to talk about real quick would be I think I was thinking specifically of America when we were talking about how we kind of I mean, there's the opening number, but also America specifically, where it's like we kind of get to really go down and have like all the extras and really kind of show the span of the city itself, which is really great also because we did have like the rooftop scene, which is iconic in itself. But once again, like very confined and stage-like, which works in its own right. But with Spielberg kind of going for this much more, grand scale, that was really working as well. Um, and of course, there's the Maria song with the balcony, which is another one where it's like, yeah, we know this scene, but the execution was really well done. I remember there were complaints about like the lens flares and stuff like that, and that does come through in this one, but I still really love like that shot where we're like looking down at Tony and like the puddles underneath him as like a full background, and like how the acrobatics kind of go up a little bit when he's on the fire escape. That was really working also. That was the scene where it was like the balcony scene was the one where I was really kind of like, okay, Spielberg's like really doing his thing with this. Like it doesn't just feel like a complete and total. Even if you recognize the scenes, if they're just amplified a little bit and have their own sort of new and unique look to them, then it's like specifically for the people that were saying like this is a completely unnecessary thing and stuff like that. Um, Now, talking about like the cast here, there is one more song change, of course, but we'll talk about that in a second, because it's a really big deal. Talking about the cast, predictably, Ansel Elgort is getting a lot of he's the weak link kind of stuff here. First off, I can pinpoint a weak link, and it's kind of a controversial opinion, but I feel like Elgort does everything that he can with this because Richard Beymer is great too, but you'll notice that Tony has never really kind of been the standout character of this whole show, of this whole story. Like it's the supporting characters are much more lively because even Maria's not doesn't really feel like that much of a standout or like a real focus. Like it's really the side characters that have always brought West Side Story to life. So as far as like being able to dance and so I'm not really like the best judge as far as like singing goes. But I didn't really notice that like anybody sucked or anything. That's the best I can give you as far as that goes. Um, but yeah, I think what Elgort really had to sell the most would have to have been the balcony scene and probably and the cool number and then like some of the later more emotional beats. And I didn't really see anything that felt too much like a misstep. So I'm fine with that. Despite the attention that like Bernardo gets and Anita gets, there is something that I said in my last video when I was talking about the original movie, and that is despite George Chakiris and Rita Moreno getting those Oscars, I always felt the standout character and the standout performance of the '61 movie was Russ Tamblyn. And like the way his body moves, it's like he lives in zero gravity. Well, the rest of the world is grounded, and that energy that he brings is so like when you talk about the way the '61 movie is just so burst into life. I feel like he has so much to do with that. And he was always the character that stood out to me from the first time I saw it, and he still is now. And sure enough, completely to not my surprise whatsoever. Well, no, actually, there's a surprise here, but also not a surprise here, in the fact that I think Mike Weiss is my favorite of this cast. And that is the fact that number one, I guess I just love the character of Riff in general, but at the same time, there is also that case of I kind of went in assuming that nobody could top Russ Tamblyn. Because I was like, I remember when this was first getting cast, and I was like, who's the unlucky soul that's going to play Riff and has to try to live up to what Russ Tamblyn put on the screen already? And it's like, that's not a job I'd put on any. I wouldn't put that job on my worst enemy because nobody could do that, right? So I am not familiar with a lot of it. I know they come, like other productions and people are certainly aware of them, that are in the know of these things, but in this whole area. But most of these are new faces to me, and I think what also really stood out about Feist's performance is that scene when he's in the basement with Tony, when we're meeting Tony for the first time, where in the original movie it's just like, Riff's just trying to convince him to go to the dance, and that's pretty much what it is. Just very energetic and showing how super likable Riff is. But here you can really get a sense in this basement scene where Riff does have like a bit of a darkness in him, where it's like where you can see that the darkness that the rumble is going to cause is already kind of underlying. Like, it's not going in this one, it's not going to seem like the darkness kind of comes from out of nowhere, and like there's a sudden change of, oh, nobody saw this coming. There's like they do it with most of the characters here, but I saw it in Riff especially since Riff is usually seen as this really, energetic character that seems to be like in love with life. You can see a darkness in him, and like these just little dramatic beats where I was like, oh, that's unexpected. But I really like it. So that's what I felt he was really bringing this also, and then and how that kind of carries over throughout the movie, where he's still super energetic, he's still very Riff like, but that you can see that sort of lurking darkness in him, that he's capable of whatever's going to happen at this rumble, or what could have happened at this rumble. So that's the performance that still stood out to me. Except of course, I feel like it's almost boring. Like, it's such a given that the standout performance appears to be Ariana DeBose, and that's the thing also where it's like, where I was just kind of dismissive of somebody else playing the character, because it's like, okay, but how do you, like, maybe not even top that, how do you at least equal that? And while I don't know that DeBose like went above and beyond Moreno's performance from the original, like, I feel like it's kind of the same emotion and the same, like, it's essentially the same performance is what I felt. But while that seems like it might be a backhanded compliment, it is like, to be able to reach that level is absolutely an accomplishment. Even if it's like, oh, it's pretty much the same as Miranda's performance was, still, that's like, that's like if somebody were to climb the top of Mount Everest and say like, oh, it's cool that you climbed Mount Everest, but somebody else did this too, so you're not very it's like, it's not the case at all. And the fact that, we can see this sort of starting to become an award-winning performance all over again, once again, is something that should have been foreseen, and some people were mentioning it, but it was, at the same time, I was like, yeah, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to have the same impact just because you get the same role, especially if you have something to live up to. But, yeah, that's... she's definitely earning all these awards she's getting, and will soon be getting even more of, for sure. What's interesting about, oh god, I gotta reach for his name now. David Alvarez, I think, is the one playing Bernardo. What I was talking with somebody about before earlier was, the different takes, because I feel like the reason Chakiris won his Oscar for playing Bernardo before was that he just has, like, it's not like a big performance, and I can't really think of a particular standout scene. It's just his sort of overall presence throughout it. To where, like, he's very magnetic and you're very drawn to him. But what's interesting about it is I was sort of comparing how Bernardo here is like, he's like the boxer and he's got like, the tough guy sort of attitude. Whereas I felt like, Chakiris played him more like George Hamilton or something. Which, like I said, like everything else we've been talking about, definitely works in its own right, in the original movie. But here, I definitely feel like, while this is great, I don't know that he has that magnetism that Chakiris had. And I know it's like, I don't like to go into stuff like this and like just talk about things as it's this thing, but then this thing was that. Like, it's just the constant comparing. But because it does feel like a very different interpretation of the character also, and I don't know which one is more true to the source or anything like that. But I still felt like there was a certain magnetism that Bernardo had previously that wasn't quite there, but that's also kind of just sort of amplifies the other performances around him also. So it's like I kind of feel about Bernardo in Spielberg's movie the way I felt about, like, basically Tony and Maria usually, where it's like they're here and they're doing their jobs and they make their scenes work and they really bring them to life in a great way, but compared to the people around them, they almost seem like they're barely there at all. And that's also to go into the fact that Rita Moreno is in this one as well. And of course, when you hear that, if you're like me, you automatically think, oh, it must just be a random cameo or something. Well, she's taking the place of the Doc character, and once again, it was more like, so she's just gonna like kind of be there to maybe give advice or something, once or twice, and tell them to get out of the store or whatever, and that'll be it. It'll just be like, oh, cool, Rita Moreno's in this. That's a connection, and she won an Oscar for this before. It's nice that she's here. Um, it's nice that I don't want to jinx anything, but I kind of love just like the fact that apart from Natalie Wood, like everybody from the original cast is pretty much still here, um, which is great. But and watching all of like the reunion interviews and stuff like that is always fun. Also, I go back to those a number of times. Um, but as far as Miranda's presence in this movie, it is like is she gonna get at least one big moment or something? And I was not anticipating what that big moment is. And because first off, it is. I remember her talking about how like kind of weird it was to be in the room with the new Anita, and how it's there's one particular really interesting moment when Miranda's kind of looking at all of them, and of course knowing like all the people like them and the dangers that this life goes into, and how this will ultimately lead to tragedy. The way having Rita Moreno look at the new cast of West Side Story and say, "I know all of you," was really that was an unexpected wow. But there is one more thing where it was like they said, "We've got Rita Moreno in this. Let's take full advantage of that." And I had no idea that they had given her somewhere. And it was like, I heard like, oh, Rita Moreno has one big scene. You're not going to believe it. And I was like, all right, she probably has like, one big moment where she like tells them to get out of the store or something. But no, they gave her somewhere. And, which is, a Tony and Maria song as we usually know it. And, I think the surprise factor probably had something to do with it, but like, the new sort of meaning behind that song in this moment now, like the new context, is it's a great moment. It's a really big moment. When one of our awards videos, I said it kind of reminded me of Hathaway having the one number on Les Mis, and how it's like sometimes that's all you need. Um, the only setback I feel like to giving that character somewhere is obviously because it would make no sense if this is what happened. We don't have the reprise at the end from Maria in the last moments. And that was kind of a downer because I don't really get that, emotionally involved in the ending of the original movie until she starts singing Somewhere Again, and then that's when it's like, oh god. So that felt like it was missing from those final moments. Like I said, it wouldn't have made sense now that I'd already given it to Moreno, but yeah, I guess that's the last thing I want to talk about because it's the one opinion I have that's like kind of, I guess, controversial. But Rachel Zegler being like this like this breakout performance, and people are saying like, oh, she completely owns this role. She won, National Board of Review's Best Actress, and they're saying this is like her star-making performance, and she's gonna blow your mind. She's gonna blow you away, and I wasn't. I mean, I had only kind of been hearing this vaguely, so it wasn't like I went in expecting her to be, the next Meryl Streep or something. But I had heard, buzz that she was really, really great, and this was going to make her a huge star, and and it no doubt will. But and like I said, I guess you could say, like, even with somebody as radiant as Natalie Wood in the part, Maria as a part, as a whole, is still, like I said, kind of overshadowed by all the supporting characters. It's just one of those things. But, I wasn't really getting much of anything at all from Zegler's performance, where it was just like, it was one thing where it was just like, it was just kind of there, like, yeah, she was performing the songs, but it's like, when you have, other movies where, people who typically, like, sing and dance for a living are coming in and having to act, and you can kind of get a sense that the acting is okay, but they're mainly here because they can, like, sing and dance and stuff like that. And you can kind of see them working kind of around the kinks, and they a lot of times they'll get much better. But when it's like their first time around, like it is for Ziegler in movies here, you kind of get that sense that, like, the singing and stuff is on point, but the acting is kind of lacking something. And that's just how I felt for the most part. Was like, well, it's her first movie, it's fine. She's doing the singing parts right, so that's what she really needs to accomplish here. But then we get to the final scene of the movie, the big emotional, like the big emotional scene of the movie, the big emotional performance. Um, and I feel like she completely dropped. Like, I was in awe of how much it felt like she dropped the ball, where she's performing the scene, but her face looked completely emotionless, and there was like I didn't see like any pain or any sadness or anything. It was just like almost like you could kind of see her like hoping she remembered her lines while she's pointing the gun around, and that was jarring. That was like unexpectedly. Oh, I don't think that scene went well. But from the sounds of it, I'm like in a very small minority of the people that thinks she didn't completely nail it. So maybe that's just me. But like I said, this will obviously be something that I see again. So I'll take a closer look at pretty much everything. And maybe she'll grow on me. Maybe there's like some nuances she went for that I didn't see. Maybe there's even nuances in that moment I wasn't picking up on in the moment. But because obviously that scene is so emotionally chaotic anyway, or supposed to be. But that's yeah. So we'll see what like a second or third viewing does with that, and we'll go from there. I guess another name I didn't mention yet was Tony Kushner, who did throw in a lot of interesting new dialogue, and that whole thing of how it's like it has this sort of people are really talking about that it has this relevancy now in regards to all stuff, and I can see where it's like where it's like you can tell where the dialogue is new, and it's Tony Kushner, so you can tell I like the idea also that it didn't like completely stand out as like it was only really kind of after the fact where I was like, oh yeah, that's new dialogue to this story. That it flows so nicely within everything else and doesn't feel like it was, it reminds me a lot of when just recently when Aaron Sorkin brought To Kill a Mockingbird to the stage, but he like adapted it and made it like super relevant, and it's like it does nothing to take away from the original product, but it's like this whole new thing where it's like it kind of seamlessly goes into the characters and comes through the characters. That's really well done. And I guess lastly, it is worth noting that this I mean, because we've got Bernstein, I wouldn't want to overshadow him, but the idea that Sondheim was just like was involved with this like right before we lost him just now, and there was the whole thing where it was he was going around, he was praising like some of the changes they made and how he said like this is gonna blow your mind, it's gonna be amazing, and it's like, well, that could be Sondheim just selling the movie or something, but it's to my understanding, the more you look into it, the more Sondheim was very open with praising other artists. There's a whole thing where he sent the letter to Trey Parker and stuff like that, among many other things. And then when you watch this, you can see that there was definitely a sincerity in that praise from Sondheim himself. So, yeah, so like I said, maybe my problem is I'm just too attached to this one. But there's definitely a lot of things to appreciate here. And I really like some of the changes also. Others will take some getting used to, but I'm sure I can get to that point eventually. But well, like I said, we'll just kind of hold off and see what a second viewing does. But overall, I do think it's very impressively done, which it's a Spielberg movie, so I don't even know why you'd have to clarify that. But yeah, but I might just be just a little too attached to have been like fully blown away by the experience. But I can certainly see how people are taking this, and the fact that we're just really having this burst in musicals this year in particular, and how it's like we're kind of actually seem to be breathing new life back into them, and hopefully that's a genre that can kind of come back successfully. They've tried a couple of times where we kind of thought, like in the La La Land area, we thought they were going to come back in this big way, but especially today, especially with how cynical everybody is, they're very hard things to pull off, musicals. But so we've really been on a roll this year, so that's great. So let's finish out on Belfast. which is a movie that I kind of just went into with no expectations. I knew Kenneth Branagh had made it. I knew it was semi-autobiographical. I knew it was an awards contender, and I knew it was black and white. So essentially, what I had just said to a lot of people that I was talking to about upcoming movies, I basically said that this appeared to be Kenneth Branagh's Roma, essentially. Um, which is, we've seen, the black and white coming of age movie made in the past few years or so before. So it was like, I'm sure this movie will be fine. I'm sure it'll have touching moments. I'm sure it might have even some nostalgic moments, even if you're not, born in that era or from that area or experienced any of these things. Still, movies can just somehow capture that. And so, yeah, just I wasn't really I wasn't really going in like cynical and saying like, oh, this is just going to be some awards bait movie or something. I just kind of went in with no expectations at all, like with just no feeling towards it whatsoever, and I can only imagine how much that helped. Just going in with no expectation. Like, I knew it was an awards frontrunner, but even then, that was just kind of in the back of my head. And it was crazy how immediately I was like, oh, this is it. How quickly the movie is like one thing that was kind of sticking out to me was it was only like an hour and a half, and for a movie like this, that's like really short. And so I was like, okay, that's interesting. That's kind of new to this. But then I was not expecting to go to the theater for the movie to come on, and about 30 seconds into the movie, 30 seconds into Belfast, I was thinking, oh, this feels different. This feels really unique and interesting. And because the thing is, first off, I was talking about this in one of the awards videos, and it was messing with me in a great way, was when I go to the theater, it's just your typical digital projection. So it's just like basically watching a DVD on a really big screen. Is what going to my theater looks like or feels like, and I was shocked when it came on, and it was like I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was the way it was shot or what, but Belfast looks like crystal clear. Like I was talking about the comparison of watching a DVD on a theater screen, it looked like it was in 4K the whole time. Like even the opening like 30 seconds that's in color, I was like, well, this looks really defined, and it's crazy. But then you get this shot, and it kind of looks like it was that thing where you almost kind of wonder if you're in the right movie or not, because everything's in really bright color, and there's just these sort of overhead shots, and it almost looks like the opening credits to like a romantic comedy or something, like a really generic romantic comedy. And then we go over a wall, over this wall that's in color, and then into the black and white. A very sort of like Wizard of Oz feeling shot, just in reverse. But that was when it was like like the way it immediately pulls you in. And that's the thing too, is this is the kind of movie where it helps a lot for you to feel like you're right there in it. And a lot of the times that involves like the just I guess the action and the characters being involving enough that you feel like you're like sitting right there with them. But I mean, it felt like I was like physically pulled into this into this movie. Like that shot where it goes from the color to the black and white as we go over the wall, almost feels like it was made to like literally pull its audience into it, and then it just has you. Like it's like it almost doesn't have to do anything else for the rest of the movie. It like has you, and you're not gonna let go of it, and it's not gonna let go of you. For the rest of this, because that opening shot grabbed you that much. And that's even the thing too, is like transitioning from color to black and white or black and white to color is not like a new thing or anything, but that's the thing, is where it's like you can take something that has been done before, but the execution means everything. And the execution of this was so, and it almost seems to build it up this much, it almost seems simple, but it's it was crazy. I don't know the last time I felt that way at the start of a movie, let alone through all, because the whole thing, like I said, I don't know that I've seen a movie that looks like this, because even the black and white still kind of plays with that a little bit, where it's like whenever there's nighttime scenes, it feels like it's not necessarily just a darker black and white. It's like a shade of blue or something. But that's the thing, is I was asking myself the whole time, is that an actual shade of blue, or am my eyes just kind of seeing that way when it's still just black and white? And I was just asking myself that the whole time. I still don't know the answer. And I love when I come out of a movie and I have technical questions that go very long without being answered, because it shows that movie magic is still there. Because it's like you go into movies and you're always thinking like, oh, this is nice, but I know how they did that, and I can imagine how they accomplished this. A movie like Belfast, like a black and white coming of age movie, set in this troubled time. I was not expecting going into this and coming out saying like, I don't really quite know how that was accomplished. And the way they do play with color also, once again, something we've seen many times before. But here in particular, the way they use color is something that I've brought up a lot. Is that if there's one thing I really, really love, it's watching a movie where you can tell that the director loves movies on a really personal level. And so it's like to kind of see when you talk about it being like, semi-autobiography, the fact that this kid is essentially a representation of Kenneth Branagh, and how there's a scene where he's reading a Thor comic book that's like, I mean, like, say what you will about the Marvel movies, whether you love them or hate them, the fact that this is the guy that cast Chris Hemsworth, and we see where Thor is today in pop culture, and to see this tiny little Kenneth Branagh reading a Thor comic book and knowing that that's kind of his movie is where it started, was like, I don't, like, that was, like, it was just this really brief, it was like the moment in West Side Story when Rita Moreno said, I know all of you. It was like just this, whoa, that was unexpected, but really impactful, and it's just a fleeting moment. Now what was I saying? I got lost on the. Oh yes, his love of movies coming through, and the use of color, where they go see Chitty Chitty Bang Bang in the theater, and it seems like it'd be an obvious artistic choice where everything's in black and white, but the movie on the screen is in color. But like I said, the way to show that and to show movies being this completely larger than life thing, it was like the whole idea of when my whole movie obsession pretty much started with when we saw the re-release of the original Star Wars in 1997, and how when you're that age and movies are that big, it's like they're a whole other world, and to demonstrate that through that black and white and color aspect here. And then just the little touches, like when we get that shot of Judi Dench, who is obviously all in black and white, but the movie still in color is reflecting off of her glasses and stuff like that. And then there is another thing where it's not even just movies; it's just watching performance art, where they go see something on the stage. They go see A Christmas Carol on the stage, I think it was, and this is a mind blowing shot where the people on the stage are in color, while everything else is black and white. And once again, I think that's another shot where you can see it reflecting, and it's like the color reflecting on the black and white portions of it's wild. It's fucking wild. And it's and that's the thing too, is it's like you can say like, oh, it's a meshing of color in black and white, and it's like, oh, like, the girl in the red coat in Schindler's List, it's not a new thing. No, you really have to see it to see why it's so mind-blowing. Like, it's not as simple as it sounds how the color is used in Belfast. It's insane, and it's that stuff in itself was why, like, immediately I wanted to see Belfast again as soon as I saw it. But because it's in this town, it was here for about 4 days, and after that 4 days, it went down to one showtime, and then it vanished without a trace. Which is exactly how I thought it would. I jumped on it as soon as I knew it was here, because I knew it wasn't staying here. And that's the whole thing. I just can't wait to see again. But it's and I hate that that's more than likely not going to be in a theater, because that's really, like, I feel like if I had seen this at home for the first time, it might not have had the same impact. So I was really, really glad to just get that one moment where it almost feels like a bit of magic in itself, where it's like it just came here very briefly and then it was just gone immediately. And it's like to be able to kind of have that magic that came through this town when Belfast was here, that really brief moment, is something that I'm very happy with. And as far as it being, like a coming of age movie, in the like these times of turmoil, so, one of the comparisons I made in one of the awards videos was it was kind of reminding me of Hope and Glory, the John Boorman movie, that I really like. Also, it was giving me vibes of that, but there's other things here that Branagh has thrown in that's having fun with it. Where there was kind of a debate going on in our last awards video about whether or not this is a comedy. And there's certainly comedic moments in it. One in particular that was standing out kind of early on was the way religion is portrayed as like this really sort of overbearing thing, and it's like how it's funny, but it's also kind of tragic because religion can be such this overbearing thing, especially if it's like in your upbringing, and the fact that the way like it seems like he's sort of it's almost like this nightmarish thing where it's like you have a priest talking, and it's this it almost seems like parody of religion, but at the same time it being that overbearing is also very real, and like I said, sometimes in tragic ways, depending on how like your upbringing is and how that it can actually traumatize people in a way. But like I said, the way that it also feels so big that it practically feels like it's bordering on parody at the same time was a really nice balance. It kind of shows that exaggerated way that kids see things that may ultimately not be as exaggerated as they might think in some cases as well. And finding that middle ground is really great. But there's also just like I was talking about the imagery everywhere, how like every single shot of this stands out, where it's like you would talk about the color shots, and it's like that's what those are the shots that really stick in your mind, and when you leave, they're still in there. And all movies kind of have all movies that are well shot have at least those one or two particular shots that really stick with you. I was like every image in this movie. Like you talk about how when Cuarón made Roma and how he was like literally just pulling out memories from his mind and completely recreating them on the screen as like literally as if we are seeing inside the mind of Cuarón and his memories as he sees them, but also in this very cinematic way. You get that sense also, especially in Belfast, because like every single shot it feels like is memorable. Like it's one of those cases where I talked about this before with stuff like Apocalypse Now, where it's like when you watch a movie and then later down the road you watch it again. Obviously there'll be like maybe one or two like you're it's having an entire movie in your mind is something that's going to happen if you've seen something a billion times. But if you've just seen it like one time, when you watch it the second time, it's going to be like, oh, I forgot about this shot, or oh, I don't remember, I don't quite remember this happening. There are those very rare cases where you can see a movie just one time, and when you see it down the road for a second time, you're going to remember everything. You're going to remember, like, I remember seeing this shot before, I remember this looking like this, and I remember this tiny little moment happening, and just everything, like, was taken in. And I feel like that's what's going to happen when I see Belfast again. It's like every single frame of this, I'm going to be like, yeah, I remember this moment. And that's an accomplishment in itself. So, yeah, and the fact that, we have, like, these... Because obviously the thing is talking about like nostalgia and bringing out your memories and stuff like that, where we only remember like the really memorable stuff, and then there's like there was a lot of mundane moments in between, but it's like all the dramatic stuff, and how this kind of feels like just this really nice encapsulation of those moments where it's like big things happen and dramatic things happened, but also there were like just little happy moments in between that really weren't that showy in regards to some other things in our life, but they were just like these places of contentment that we can remember, and I feel like there's a lot of those in this as well, and the way he was able to capture that is... Yeah, so I just really love pretty much everything about this movie, and like I said, I really was not expecting it. I just assumed that this would just be like, yeah, that's a nice movie, and it's a clear awards contender, and it's fine. I guess it'll deserve its awards, whatever. No, the fact that Belfast was like front runner at some point, and now it kind of seems to be getting bumped out by other competition makes me really sad. I would have loved if this had stayed like a really big frontrunner. And like, Kenneth Branagh was really high on the director list, like being a threat to win. Which I'm not saying that couldn't still happen, but there's a lot of competition going on. That's a whole other conversation we've been having and we will continue to have throughout the week. So, but yeah, the gist of this is that I really really love Belfast. So that's pretty much where I stand with that. So. Um, the next thing we're going to talk about is I'll either squeeze out another catch up on these awards contenders video, or it'll just be, I think tomorrow already is fucking Kingsman and The Matrix, so that'll probably be what happens next realistically. But we'll work towards all this stuff, and all the animated stuff I missed I'll be catching up on as well. Except for Flea, I have no idea when or how I'm gonna see Flea, but hopefully that happens at some point, especially before all the awards stuff really comes into play. So, yeah, like we were talking about before, I've got some other stuff planned. There's going to be there's a couple more Emily Blunt videos that I'm planning, and my brother and myself will be talking about Hawkeye when he's in for Christmas, and that'll go out, and some more stuff, I'm sure. So until whatever the next thing is, I think that's it.